The familiar click-clack of my fingers on the keyboard was my only companion in the quiet Prague night. This old attic apartment, with its arched windows overlooking a sea of red-tiled roofs under the silver moonlight, always offered a strange source of inspiration, sometimes bordering on a chilling loneliness. I, Anya, a young writer trying to piece together dreams with words, often found peace in the darkness, where the world seemed to hold its breath, listening to the stories forming in my head. That night was no different. I was engrossed in the final chapter of my new novel, the desk lamp casting warm yellow streaks on the paper and my face. Occasionally, I would look up, letting my mind wander with the ancient beauty of the city at night. It was during one such moment, when my eyes inadvertently drifted towards the window, that I saw him. Across the cobblestone street, under the pale moonlight, a man stood motionless. Darkness enveloped most of his body, revealing only a portion of his pale face turned directly towards my apartment. Without a single movement, without a sign of life, he just stood there, a solitary figure in the dead of night. But his eyes seemed to pierce through the darkness, fixed on where I was sitting. A shiver ran down my spine. At first, I thought it was just a hallucination from working too late. But when I rubbed my eyes and looked again, he was still there, his position unchanged, his stillness unnerving. My heart began to beat faster, a feeling of unease creeping into my mind. I quickly pulled the curtains closed, trying to banish that haunting image. But the unease didn't disappear. It lingered in the room like a cold mist, making it impossible for me to concentrate on my work. I tried to reassure myself, perhaps it was just a passerby stopping for a rest, or a drunkard who had lost his way. But my reason couldn't accept those flimsy explanations. His lifeless gaze and strange immobility haunted my thoughts. The nights that followed became a long series of days lived in simmering fear. Every time night fell, I would unconsciously look out the window. And he was always there. Sometimes he stood under the streetlight, his face hidden in shadow, only his tall figure and dark coat visible. Other times, he would stand concealed in the shadows of the old buildings, revealing only a part of his pale face staring intently up at my apartment. I began to feel like someone was watching me even when I was inside. The soft creaking of the old wooden floorboards, the faint whistling of the wind through the window cracks, all became more terrifying than ever before. I always had the feeling that an invisible gaze was following my every move. From the moment I woke up until I drifted into a fitful, nightmare-filled sleep. One evening, as I was trying to make a cup of tea to soothe my frayed nerves, I heard a soft rustling sound under the door. My heart seemed to stop. Creeping over, I looked down at the gap under the door. A small gray piece of paper was carelessly stuffed there. Trembling, I picked it up and saw only a single scrawled line written in Czech. I didn't understand it. The unfamiliar letters were like ancient symbols carrying a mysterious curse. The fear within me began to transform into panic. I tried to find the meaning of the line online, but to no avail. I asked my Czech friends, but none of them recognized the strange script. The small piece of paper became a terrifying piece of evidence, a cryptic message from the darkness that was enveloping my life. I began to suspect everything. Was this just a normal stalker, a sick individual who had randomly targeted me? Or was there a darker secret hidden behind this surveillance, perhaps related to the history of this old building? The chilling stories of wandering spirits in the ancient streets of Prague began to haunt my mind. Who was that man? What did he want? Why me? I tried to learn about the history of the building. The rumors of mysterious disappearances, the moaning sounds echoing from the old walls, only added to my terror. Perhaps I had inadvertently awakened some dark force lurking in the shadows of this apartment. One night, I woke up to a strange sound. A prolonged creaking echoing from downstairs. This attic apartment was the top floor. No one lived above or below me. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I tried to listen. The creaking came again, this time seeming to be right outside my bedroom door. I lay as still as a stone statue, my breath caught in my chest. Thick darkness enveloped the room, with only the pale moonlight streaming through the window cracks painting strange shapes on the walls. My heart pounded, each beat like a death knell. Then I heard a whisper. A hoarse, cold voice like the winter wind echoed right by my ear. I couldn't clearly make out the words, but its chilling tone instilled in me a profound terror. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to cover my ears, but that horrifying sound still pierced through every barrier, seeping deep into my mind. I felt a cold presence very close, something invisible but menacing. That night, I couldn't sleep anymore. I sat huddled on the bed, clutching the thin blanket as if it could protect me from the dark forces that were lurking. The moonlight illuminated the room, painting flickering ghosts on the walls, deepening my fear. The next morning, I decided I had to do something. I couldn't continue living in this fear and unease. I called the police, but they just dismissed it as a normal case of harassment and advised me to install security cameras. Feeling frustrated and alone, I reached out to an old friend, a folklore researcher in Prague. I told him about the mysterious man and the strange note. He listened to me attentively, his eyes showing a thoughtful expression. After hearing my story, he pondered for a moment and then said, "Anya, old buildings in Prague often hold untold stories. Perhaps the man you saw isn't just an ordinary person, and that writing, it could be a sign." He promised to help me research the history of the building and the meaning of the writing. While waiting, I tried to keep myself busy, but fear always lurked in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to swallow me whole. Every time night fell, I would look out the window. He was still there. His eyes, though not clearly visible in the darkness, still made me feel like I was being pierced through. I knew my life was no longer peaceful. I was trapped in a horror story from which I couldn't escape. And I was afraid that the ending of this story would be even more terrifying than anything I had ever written. The morning mist in Kyoto held an eerie beauty, swallowing all sound and sight, transforming the world into a blurred, fantastical painting. For me, Hiroki, the path through the bamboo forest to school was a familiar part of my daily life. I had walked this way hundreds of times, but that particular morning carried a different feeling. An unsettling stillness that blanketed everything. The towering bamboo stalks, their vibrant green bodies reaching straight towards the sky, usually rustled in the gentle breeze like a soothing melody. But that day they stood motionless, their small leaves not even stirring. The fog was so thick that visibility was limited to just a few meters ahead. The air was damp and cold, seeping deep into my skin. Suddenly, in the middle of the path, I saw a figure. A woman dressed in a pure white kimono stood as still as a statue, her back completely turned towards me. The whiteness of her kimono stood out starkly against the deep green of the bamboo forest and the pale gray of the fog, creating an image that was both serene and bizarre. I stopped short, surprised and a little perplexed. It was rare for anyone to walk this path at this hour. I was about to call out, asking if she needed any help, but a strange feeling stopped me. There was a terrifying silence enveloping the area, as if time had stood still. She didn't move, didn't make a sound. I stood there for a moment, observing. Then, a vague sense of unease began to creep into my mind. Something wasn't right. A normal person wouldn't stand so still in such thick fog. Finally, I decided to edge around her, trying to walk past the woman. As I went by, I still couldn't see her face. Her long black hair cascaded down her back, almost completely obscuring her neck. I felt a gust of cold air emanate from her, even though there was no wind. I quickly walked away, trying not to think about the strange woman anymore. But her image haunted my mind throughout the school day. The following week, on a similarly foggy morning, I was walking to school again through the bamboo forest path. And then I saw her. This time, the woman in the white kimono was still standing in the exact same spot, but there was a difference. She was facing me. My heart seemed to stop. Her face was pale white, completely devoid of expression. Her eyes were wide open but empty, without pupils. An endless blackness drew me in, making me feel a primal fear surge within me. There was no life in those eyes. Only a terrifying stillness, an unnerving emptiness. She looked directly at me, but it was as if she didn't truly see me. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to move. Fear spread through my body, making me feel frozen. I tried to speak, but my throat constricted. Then a slow smile spread across her pale face. A distorted smile, without any warmth, only coldness and dread. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and ran, sprinting towards the school. The sound of my heart pounding in my chest drowned out even the sound of my own footsteps. I didn't dare turn back, but I could feel that empty gaze still following me. Ever since then, I have always felt haunted by the image of that mysterious woman. Every time I walk through the bamboo forest path, I feel uneasy, afraid that she will appear again. The fog has become something frightening, concealing things I don't want to see. I told my friends and family about my encounters, but no one believed me. They said I must have imagined it all, or that it was just an ordinary passerby. But I know what I saw. Those empty eyes, that cold smile, they are etched deep into my mind. I began to research the legends and ghost stories of the Kyoto countryside. I read about yokai, lost spirits, and chilling tales of people who had disappeared in the bamboo forest. Some say that it could be a ghost of a woman who died unjustly and is now wandering, seeking solace or revenge. Others speculated that it was a type of demon that often appears in the form of a woman without a face, whose sole purpose is to frighten travelers. I don't know who she was or what she wanted. But every time I recall the image of the woman in the white kimono standing in the middle of the misty path, a cold fear spreads through my body. The bamboo forest path, which used to be a peaceful passage, has now become a place of haunting and mystery, where I always fear I will have to face those empty eyes and that cold smile again. And I wonder, will she just stand there and look at me next time? Or will she come closer? That fear follows me always, even when I am far away from that foggy path. Cairo at night carries an ancient mystique, a heavy silence steeped in thousands of years of history. I, Omar, a security guard, was a small part of that silence, a solitary shadow patrolling the drafty corridors and hushed galleries of this old art museum. My night shift was usually a symphony of echoing footsteps on marble floors and my own soft sighs. Tonight was no different. The air was thick with the scent of time-worn dust and the faint aroma of decaying wood from the antique window frames. Soft yellow lights cast shadows on the statues and reliefs, creating strange shapes as if the ancient spirits were hiding in the darkness, watching my every move. I was passing through the area displaying the ancient statues, where solemn pharaohs and stern-faced Egyptian gods reigned in millennia of silence. Suddenly I stopped short. A strange sound echoed, very faint, like stone rubbing against stone, coming from the end of the hallway. My heart beat a little faster. Usually at this hour, the museum was completely silent. Perhaps it was just a stray cat that had wandered in, or a draft of wind whistling through an old window crack. But curiosity, mixed with a touch of unease, urged me towards the sound. When I got closer, I saw no one. The statues stood still on their pedestals, their cold stone faces gazing into the void. I scanned my surroundings, no signs of forced entry or any disturbance. But then I noticed something odd. On the pedestal of each statue, a Polaroid photograph was placed neatly. I frowned, confused. Who would leave these photos here? I approached the first statue, a pharaoh with the familiar Nemes headdress. On the stone base, a small Polaroid lay still. I picked it up, and a cold sensation ran down my spine. The photo was of me. I was patrolling this very hallway, but the moment in the photo didn't seem to be now. The lighting in the picture was different, and so was my posture. I remembered that moment clearly about an hour ago when I was checking this area. I looked at the statue next to it, a goddess with a serene face. On her pedestal was another Polaroid. This time, the photo captured me from a different angle as I stood with my back turned, looking at a display case. The time in the photo was probably about half an hour ago. The initial confusion gradually gave way to a vague unease. This couldn't be a random coincidence. Someone had taken these photos, and they had done it while I was on patrol. I continued along the row of statues, and on the pedestal of each one was a Polaroid photograph. Each photo captured a different moment from my night shift. Some photos were taken from a distance as I walked down the hallway. But there were photos taken very close-ups of my face as I focused on some artifact. A chilling feeling spread throughout my body. It was as if an invisible ghost was stealthily following my every step, recording my every action in the darkness. I tried to reassure myself. Perhaps this was just a sick joke by someone. Some mischievous colleague had sneaked in and was playing a prank on me. But that thought didn't dispel the growing unease in my heart. How could they have taken these photos without me noticing? Especially the close-up shots, as if they had been standing right behind me. I stopped in front of a colossal statue of Anubis, the jackal-headed god who guarded the afterlife. On the stone base, another Polaroid lay there. I picked it up, and this time, my heart seemed to stop. In the photo, I was standing right in front of this statue, just like I was now. But there was a difference. Right behind me, in the shadows, a strange figure was faintly visible. It was tall, thin, and seemed to be looking directly at the camera. Its face was obscured in the darkness, but I could feel a cold and terrifying presence emanating from the photograph. I spun around, looking into the darkness behind me. No one was there. Only the ancient statue stood silently in the yellow light. But the image in the photo haunted my mind. I began to feel like an unseen presence was watching my every move. Not just someone playing a prank, but something else, something ancient and terrifying. Could it be the spirits of the ancient pharaohs disturbed by my presence? Were they punishing me for trespassing on their resting place? Chilling questions swirled in my mind, making it impossible for me to remain calm. I frantically searched around, trying to find any trace of whoever had taken these photos. But there was nothing. Only the cold stone statues and the strange Polaroid photos, like invisible eyes watching me in the darkness. As the night wore on, the fear within me intensified. Every small sound, every swaying shadow made me jump. I felt like someone was breathing down my neck, whispering ancient curses into my ear. I tried to contact the security department, but there was no signal on my phone. I was completely isolated in this vast museum, surrounded by the ghosts of the past. Finally, as the first rays of dawn began to filter through the tall windows, I was almost exhausted with fear. I still didn't know who or what had taken those photos. But I knew one thing for sure: tonight had changed me forever. From that day on, every night shift at the museum became a terrifying ordeal for me. I always felt like someone was watching me in the darkness, and I never dared to turn my back on the ancient statues again. The Polaroid photos were still there, in the drawer of my desk, like a cold reminder of that terrifying night, and of the unseen presence I had felt in the darkness of the ancient Cairo Museum. I didn't know if it was a sick joke, or truly the spirits of the pharaohs, but the fear remained, gnawing at my mind every time night fell. The Berlin night often carries a quiet beauty, a strange contrast to the bustling rhythm of the day. But that night, that silence was tinged with a different hue, a grim shade of unease slowly creeping into my mind. Sophia, that's me, an Italian exchange student trying to immerse myself in the new life of this city. My small apartment on the third floor of an old building usually became a peaceful refuge after long hours of studying at the university. But tonight, that peace had been shattered. I returned home late as usual, when the streets were deserted and only a few dim yellow lights cast lonely pools on the wet pavement. The scent of the night rain still lingered in the air, mixed with the characteristic musty smell of old Berlin houses. I locked the door carefully, dropped my heavy bag onto the creaking wooden floor, and let out a tired sigh. My tiny apartment consisted of just a bedroom, a living room connected to the kitchen, and a bathroom. The soft yellow light from the desk lamp cast onto the white-painted walls, creating a cozy space. At least that's what I always tried to tell myself. After brushing my teeth and washing my face, I slipped into my familiar single bed. The thick duvet enveloped my body, offering a bit of warmth against the night's chill. My eyes closed, and I began to drift into sleep, a restless and shallow slumber. Then, around the middle of the night, I was awakened by a strange sound. It wasn't the familiar blare of city car horns, nor the gentle patter of rain on the window. It was a soft thud, as if someone had bumped into something in the living room. My heart suddenly began to race. The feeling that someone had broken into my apartment invaded my mind, planting a cold seed of fear. I lay completely still, listening. The frantic beating of my heart drowned out all other sounds. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I tried to reassure myself, perhaps it was just a stray cat that had wandered onto the balcony, or a branch tapping against the window due to the wind, but my intuition told me something was wrong. With a caution I had never felt before, I gently lifted the duvet off my body. The cold wooden floor touched my feet, making me shiver. I crept out of the bedroom, trying not to make any noise. The narrow hallway was pitch black, with only a faint sliver of light seeping through the living room door. I slowly pushed the living room door open. The room was still dark, but the faint moonlight filtering through the window was enough for me to see everything. The dark brown leather sofa sat undisturbed. The glass coffee table was untouched. Everything seemed normal. A soft sigh of relief escaped my lips. Perhaps I had just been too worried. Just a dream or a sound caused by the wind. I turned to go back to the bedroom, but just then something caught my eye. The closet door in my bedroom, the door I was absolutely certain I had closed tightly before going to bed, was now slightly ajar. A small gap, just wide enough for something to peer through. A cold feeling ran down my spine. I stood frozen, not daring to breathe. The faint moonlight illuminated that gap, and I saw it. An eye. A cold, black, and hateful eye staring directly at me from inside the closet. It didn't blink, didn't move, it simply stared, a piercing gaze that locked onto my mind. A scream caught in my throat. The blood in my veins seemed to freeze. I realized with horror that I was not alone in this apartment. Someone was here, hiding in my closet, and had been watching me sleep all night. Who was the intruder? How long had they been hiding in the closet? And what did they want from me? A series of terrifying questions drilled into my mind, planting a seed of utter fear. I stood paralyzed, unable to move, like a rabbit hypnotized by the gaze of a venomous snake. The eye in the darkness didn't leave me, carrying a hatred and malice I had never seen before. Time seemed to stop. In the still and dark space, only the struggle between my gaze and that cold eye remained. I felt an evil presence lurking in the darkness. Something dark and dangerous was lying in wait. Finally, reason returned. I knew I couldn't just stand there. I had to do something. But what? Run away? Confront it? My heart pounded like it wanted to explode out of my chest. I slowly backed away, my eyes never leaving the crack in the closet door. Each step on the wooden floor echoed terrifyingly in the encompassing silence. I felt like thousands of eyes were watching me from the darkness. When my back touched the cold wall, I knew I had nowhere left to retreat. I stared intently at the closet door, waiting for the worst to happen. That eye was still there, unwavering. A soft creaking sound came from inside the closet. The door opened a little wider. The darkness inside seemed to thicken, and I felt a cold gust of air waft out, carrying a foul, metallic odor. The fear within me reached its peak. I squeezed my eyes shut and screamed, a sound that was choked off in my throat, because I knew, even if I screamed until my voice was hoarse, no one would hear me in this small apartment, in the quiet Berlin night. I opened my eyes. That eye was still there, but this time I didn't just see an eye. I saw part of a face, pale and distorted, hidden behind the darkness. A gruesome smirk appeared, revealing yellowed and sharp teeth. And then, from within the darkness, a hoarse voice echoed, quiet but threatening, in a language I had never heard before. "Good evening, Sophia." That was the most terrifying night of my life. The night when loneliness and fear enveloped me, and I realized that, sometimes, the most frightening things lurk right beside us, in the very home we thought was the safest. Would I survive this night? And who was hiding in my closet? Who were they really? Those questions haunted me, planting a seed of unease and terror in my mind that would linger for a long time to come.